You're reading this sentence, and somewhere in the last few seconds, you might have felt it start. That stretch behind your jaw, that pull at the back of your throat, that involuntary urge to open your mouth wide and pull in a long breath you never consciously decided to take. You're about to yawn, right now, just from reading the word. Here's the strange part. Scientists have been studying yawning for over a century, and there is still no single, universally agreed upon answer for why we do it. Not why it happens when we're tired, not why it happens when we're bored, and especially not why watching someone else yawn, or even reading about yawning, like you're doing right now, can trigger the exact same response in you. This is one of the oldest, weirdest, most contagious behaviors in the human body, and we still don't fully understand it. Before there were humans to ask the question, there was already yawning. Fish yawn, reptiles yawn, birds yawn, even unborn human babies yawn. Ultrasound scans have captured fetuses yawning inside the womb as early as 11 weeks of pregnancy, months before they'll ever take an independent breath. That means yawning isn't some strange human quirk layered on top of evolution. It's one of the oldest, most deeply wired behaviors in the vertebrate nervous system, older than mammals, older than warm blood, older than the very concept of tired. Whatever yawning is for, evolution decided it was important enough to keep for hundreds of millions of years across nearly every backbone creature on the planet. That alone should tell you it's not just a random glitch. For most of the 20th century, there was one dominant explanation for yawning, and doctors, teachers, and parents repeated it with total confidence. You yawn because your body needs more oxygen, and yawning is a way of pulling in a big gulp of air to fix it. It made intuitive sense. You yawn when you're tired, tired people breathe slower, slower breathing means less oxygen, so yawning fixes the deficit. Case closed. Except it wasn't true. In 1987, researchers ran an experiment that quietly broke this theory. They had people breathe air with different oxygen and carbon dioxide levels, including air with extra oxygen pumped in and air with almost none, and tracked how often they yawned in each condition. If the oxygen theory were correct, low oxygen air should have triggered a flood of yawning, and oxygen-rich air should have stopped it almost completely. Neither happened. Yawning rates barely changed at all. An idea that had been taught as scientific fact for most of a century turned out to be, essentially, a very convincing guess. So if it's not about oxygen, what is it about? The theory with the strongest evidence today is almost the opposite of what everyone assumed. Yawning may be your brain's built-in cooling system. Your brain runs best within a narrow temperature range, and it generates a huge amount of heat just from normal activity. Some estimates suggest the brain produces roughly a fifth of your body's total metabolic heat, despite being a small fraction of your body weight. When you're tired or when your surroundings get warmer, your brain temperature can creep upward. A yawn does something remarkable in response. That deep inhale of air cools the blood flowing through the sinuses near your brain, and the wide stretch of your jaw increases blood flow to your head and face. Researchers who study this theory have found that people yawn more often in warm environments than cold ones, and that yawning frequency tends to drop once room temperature crosses a certain threshold, as if the body senses that yawning wouldn't help cool things down anymore, so it stops bothering. In other words, you might not be yawning because you're tired. You might be yawning because your brain is quietly running a temperature check and adjusting itself in real time. Now here's the part almost everyone has experienced, but few people can explain. Contagious yawning. You see someone yawn, maybe you don't even fully see it. Maybe you just read the word yawn enough times in the last few minutes, and suddenly you're doing it too. This isn't a studies estimate that somewhere between 40 and 60% of people will yawn after watching someone else do it, and the effect is strong enough that it doesn't require sound, or even direct eye contact. Just the visual trigger of a mouth opening wide is often enough. What makes this stranger is who catches it and who doesn't. Several studies have found that contagious yawning appears to be linked to empathy and social bonding. People tend to catch yawns more easily from friends and family than from strangers. Some research on children with autism spectrum conditions has found reduced rates of contagious yawning compared to neurotypical children, which has led some researchers to treat contagious yawning as a subtle marker of social connection, wired into the brain's mirror neuron system, the same network involved in unconsciously mimicking other people's expressions and body language. And it's not just a human thing. Chimpanzees catch yawns from other chimpanzees. Dogs have been shown in multiple studies to yawn more often after watching their own human owner yawn than after watching a stranger do it. A strange, silent form of interspecies bonding that most dog owners have never noticed they're part of.
Here's a detail most people never connect to yawning. It isn't only linked to being tired or bored. It also shows up right before moments of intense focus. Olympic athletes have been observed yawning repeatedly in the minutes before a race, not because they're sleepy moments before the biggest performance of their life, but seemingly the opposite. Paratroopers preparing to jump, musicians about to walk on stage, and competitive swimmers on the starting blocks have all been documented yawning in the final stretch before an adrenaline spike. This has led some researchers to propose that yawning isn't purely a winding down signal. It might also be a state change signal, something your nervous system uses whenever it's about to shift gears, whether that's from awake to asleep or from calm to high alert. Under this theory, yawning isn't the opposite of alertness. It's a kind of internal reset button, used anytime your brain is about to transition from one mode into another. Long before anyone had a scientific theory for yawning, cultures around the world had their own explanations, and most of them agreed on one strange point. A yawn was dangerous, and covering your mouth mattered. In several ancient and folk traditions, spanning cultures from parts of Europe to West Africa, an open yawning mouth was believed to be a moment of vulnerability, a point where your soul or your life force could accidentally slip out of your body, or where an evil spirit could slip in. Covering your mouth during a yawn wasn't just considered polite. In some traditions, it was treated as genuinely protective, a small defensive gesture against something unseen. It's a strange thing to realize. The habit of covering your mouth when you yawn, something almost everyone still does today, likely didn't start as etiquette. It probably started as a superstition about souls escaping through an open mouth, and the gesture outlived the belief behind it by thousands of years. Here's what makes yawning genuinely unusual among human behaviors. It sits at the overlap of at least 3 different systems in your body, and scientists still argue about which one is really in charge. It's tied to your sleep-wake cycle. You yawn more when tired or bored. It's tied to brain temperature regulation. You yawn more in warm environments. And it's tied to your social and emotional brain. You catch yawns from people you're emotionally close to. No single explanation fully accounts for all 3 patterns at once, which is part of why, after more than 100 years of research, there still isn't one unified answer. Some researchers now believe yawning might not have one single purpose at all, that it may be a multi-purpose reflex that evolution repurposed for several overlapping jobs over millions of years, the same way an old tool from an ancient toolkit sometimes gets adapted for a completely different task generations later. So the next time you yawn, mid-meeting, mid-drive, mid-video, you're doing something that predates human language, human fire, and human civilization itself. Something a fish did. Something a fetus does in the womb before it's ever taken a breath outside its mother's body. Something your dog might do right back at you, just because it's watching you closely enough to care. It's not laziness. It's not boredom. Not entirely. It might be your brain quietly cooling itself down. It might be a signal passed silently between 2 people who are paying attention to each other. It might be your nervous system flipping a switch before something important happens. And somewhere, in a culture you've probably never heard of, someone once believed that covering your mouth during that exact moment was the only thing standing between you and losing your soul. Go ahead. Yawn. You've earned it. If a behavior this old and this strange doesn't have one clear answer, you have to wonder what else your body does every day that science still can't fully explain. That video's coming next.